Okay,
How are you?
we are now past due.
Yeah.
Okay.
Work tonight.
So hello, it's very nice to see everyone in person. Welcome to the July 13th meeting of the Heritage Preservation Commission. We are meeting in person currently at Edina City Hall, but we do have one of our commissioners, Commissioner Bob Cundy, joining us via WebEx. And I believe he's the only one joining. Oh, it looks like Commissioner Everson. So we have Commissioner Everson and Commissioner Cundy joining us via WebEx tonight. To participate in community comment, residents must attend our meeting in person. Residents do also have the option of submitting a commission correspondence form online, which you can find on the city's website. So welcome to all of those watching this meeting remotely, and we'll get started. So Emily, could I get a roll call of attendance, please?
Yes, Commissioner Longquist.
Here.
Commissioner Pollock.
Here.
Commissioner Cundy.
Here.
Commissioner Knudsen.
Here.
Commissioner Woodmoyer.
Here.
Commissioner Nemo.
Here.
Commissioner Everson.
Here.
And Chair Schilling.
Here. Thank you, Emily. First on our agenda is the approval of the meeting agenda. Do I have a motion to approve this agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Emily, could I please get a roll call vote on the approval of the meeting agenda?
Yes. Commissioner Longquist.
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock.
Aye.
Commissioner Cundy.
Aye.
Commissioner Knudsen.
Aye.
Commissioner Woodmoyer.
Aye.
Commissioner Nemo.
Aye.
Commissioner Everson.
Aye.
And
Aye.
Chair Schilling.
Aye. Okay. Do I have a motion of approval of the meeting minutes for the June 8th meeting?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Emily, can I have a roll call vote on the approval of the June 8th meeting minutes, please?
Yes. Commissioner Longquist.
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock.
Aye.
Commissioner Cundy.
Aye.
Commissioner Knudsen.
Aye.
Commissioner Woodmoyer.
Aye.
Commissioner Nemo.
Aye.
Commissioner Everson.
Aye.
Chair Schilling.
Aye. Thank you. The next section on our agenda is community comment. As I stated a few minutes ago, community comment happens in person, and I don't see any community members here today. So we will move to the next section, which is our reports and recommendations. The first in this section is the COA for the Wooddale Avenue Bridge. And the action that we have been asked to take tonight is to move that to the August meeting. Do I have a motion to move the COA for the Wooddale Avenue Bridge to the August meeting?
Before we move, may I just add a point of discussion that we maybe could put in the minutes to suggest or add a link so that we all review the plan of treatment in advance, just as a prompt, so that we're not processing it live.
I think that's a good suggestion.
However that best fits.
Yeah, great.
But I moved to table it.
Okay.
So a link in the minutes, a link in,
What would be appropriate?
is it the idea for you guys? I can email it out to you guys. Or is it for the public?
No, just for us.
Just for you guys. I can shoot an email out to you guys with the link.
That would be super.
That would be great.
What about when can you send us the Novus agenda and then you just have it in that same
Yep.
email?
I'll
So it's
definitely
all
include it
the
in
same.
the Novus agenda. They will be included in the packet item when it's posted. I just didn't include anything in it tonight because we're working through some questions that we have with our engineering department before we move forward on it. So it will definitely be included with the Novus agenda item for the next packet, but I can send that out prior to then if you guys.
Prior to would be, I would appreciate it.
Okay. Yep, I can do that.
And Emily, is the applicant the engineering department?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
good. So I was gonna say, we could request them to be here if they weren't.
Yes. Chad will be here, whether it's virtually or in person,
Okay,
depending on whether the item will, right now we moved it to the August meeting.
Okay,
It's up in the air whether or not it will be actually in front of you in August or September. And
Got it.
Kind of depending on their schedule.
okay,
Okay, so Commissioner Lundquist did move to send that COA to the August meeting with the request that Emily send a link to the plan of treatment for the Wooddale Avenue Bridge. Do I have a second?
Second.
Emily, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Commissioner Longquist,
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock,
Aye.
Commissioner Cundy,
Aye.
Commissioner Knutson,
Aye.
Commissioner Woodmeyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Nemo,
Aye.
Commissioner Everson,
Aye.
Chair Schilling.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to the next step in our 2022 work plan. So included in the packet, Emily was kind enough to provide a list of what we had discussed in the prior meeting. And we need to take those ideas and start wrapping those up and placing them, deciding on which ones are going to be part of our work plan. Just need to get the- Okay, does anyone want to start, or we can start from the top of the list? So, go ahead.
I'll just share that because I don't edit well live, I was looking at it and wrote down some thoughts and shared with Annie and Emily. And it seems to me that the first 4 items are really ongoing. Maybe they'd be labeled as such. And so if it's helpful to either call up the language or I could read and just sort of clarifying some.
Let me,
Just trying to fine tune. I didn't touch the archaeological language because I was not an expert there, but some of the others I tried to add a little clarity of my thinking so others could react.
I can. There we go.
Do you want to?
Well, no, I can.
No, I mean,
you
go
know,
ahead, Jay.
Well, I would also ask Emily and Robert, is there any change? I think the first 4 are quite obvious. Do they work as written? You know, are there improvements to what's up there?
I think if you worded them, I mean, they've been in every work plan
Yeah,
commission
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
had, so.
Yeah, I just wrote these, started these as like rough.
Exactly,
notes, So we
exactly.
can fill them out kind of as needed. I can take the language that you suggested and we can go from there for the next time. I didn't take the language directly how it's written in our work plan today. But yeah, the top 4 are just the ongoing items that you guys are continually working
mean,
on.
If you didn't have those as an initiative, you'd have to direct Emily to she writes your to explain that to your federal partners, because it is one of your legal responsibilities.
But yeah, to clarify and like what the work you guys are actually doing or the goals of those items,
Yeah.
if you rewording them works just fine.
okay. And the only sort of editorial, the 4th one, when we talked as a brainstorm, let's put some effort into adding new people to the eligible list. I don't feel that's a priority unless someone's coming to us, so I worded it this way. I think we've got enough of a parking lot.
Well, you have a backlog of over
Exactly.
100 properties.
Right.
so
Right.
The longer you kick that can down the road, the
Right,
onerous it's going to be. to
Yeah.
catch up.
And in the last year, people who are interested do reach out and ask. In the last year, Robert and I met with someone who thought they might be interested. It ended up they weren't. And
Yeah.
we met with them and talked through it. And we can continue to do
The
that.
lady in White Oak,
Yep.
okay.
that was kind of fun, actually. It turned out kind of sad, but it
Oh.
turns out money talks louder than
Yeah.
nostalgia.
And then I guess so under new, we talked about looking at plans of treatment, and then we also talked about looking at the country club district's plan of treatment.
Well, I would recommend that you do that, but that you leave the country club till last, since you climbed up that mountain and down the other side so many times. But the first 5 properties that were registered locally were all done in a hurry in 2002 when ordinance got revised. And so the plans of treatment for those properties, the KF school, installed there, some houses on there. Oh, the Grimes house, which you guys never talked about, which is far and away the most interesting old house in the United.
Mhm.
And has really committed preservationist owners also, which is kind of fun. But I think you should look at those and then work your way down and do Marie Oskin's house and a fun day at the end, since those were the most recent. But I think that'd be a great exercise. It'd be a way to see what has been registered, which is it's a really interesting mix of cultural resources. And it points out some of the, programmatic challenges that we.
And would that involve like actual on-site visits or?
So I think kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, read it as a group, maybe go visit and ask potentially the homeowner to give you a walk through if it's at home or whatnot. And
Well,
that
that'd
kind of
be,
thing, or is that?
be done. I was thinking of it, it's something we could do one a month, get done in a calendar year, and I kind of like that for some of this stuff, but.
In years past, I know that there used to be a walking
Yeah.
meeting.
Every
or like
summer,
a visit.
Yeah,
That this meeting used to
It
be.
used to be
the one
walking
we used
tour.
to take off.
So that's why we started, COVID is the reason why we started doing the virtual walking tour, because Andy was gonna bring that back. But to meet elsewhere, we would need to notify the public, and there's different posting requirements, so we would have to kind of have that planned out ahead of time. And we would have to work through logistics if we actually have other items to deal with, but if we want to do one of the meetings in the summertime or one particular month that we know we want to go see a couple properties or visit one or two, we can plan ahead. And I suggest maybe putting that on the work plan if that's your intent, like doing a.
I think that's a really good idea to get you out, even if it's like, I mean, we always assume that you all know all about the KO school and beach home.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah,
probably
I don't know.
not a really good assumption on our part. And it's too even.
Yeah.
The problem with the guy is everything's so far apart.
Is it possible to-
Sometimes with expedition.
Is it possible for us to hold one of our meetings like at the Grange Hall?
It's been done before.
Yeah, I mean,
You just use that as the meeting place.
yeah.
Yeah, we would
Then
just,
it could be.
And what we usually
They have a,
try to do.
yeah, because I know it's in the
is
summer.
that
Yeah.
Involve the Edina Historical Society in that one, because that's another thing that we have tried to work in as an annual thing that it tends to get shuffled off once in a while, but I think it's important. And it's just, I'm doing it in the summertime, it's the time to speak local.
Emily, what is the lead time we need in terms of notification?
Well, it would be nice if we knew when we created the schedule, so I could put it on the schedule, so people who are doing certificates of appropriateness. We could kind of plan around that. If I know, oh, our August or September meeting is gonna be elsewhere, if that's noted on the schedule, people will know and kind of plan around that, hopefully then.
But we've
Um,
approved COAs at the Cato School in the past. I think,
I'd like to avoid that if possible.
well,
Yeah. So, just based on how all this stuff moving forward will work, there'll be more to come on that, I'm sure. But, I'd like to know with the creation of our work plan, what month we're shooting for, that way we can plan for it.
it's.
It seems like July is pretty slow with COAs.
Yeah,
So I think,
the walking
yeah,
tours have always been in July, August, some years.
yeah.
Uh,
So if we plan for July and there is a COA that pops up, it could roll to August maybe, and then,
Or just
We
do
can
it
deal
as a
with it.
special.
Yeah.
You want to give yourself enough time to actually see it and to talk to who's ever most knowledgeable about the properties. And you don't want to rush through the site visits.
Well, that's why it's good if we can plan around it
Yeah.
and not have COAs and all that stuff too.
But every now and then it's happened that, there was
Mhm.
one that already had been delayed a couple of times and it was, if it's for garage or something. Do it on the fly.
So then are you guys thinking the Cahill School? And, or is there another property, or you guys
I think it would
you can
be,
think
I
about
mean,
that
if we're gonna hold a meeting
Mhm.
that on site, it would probably be the Grange Hall.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, and while we're at the Grange Hall, we can walk across the sidewalk and peek in.
Yeah, accessibility.
Yeah, right, and we can peek at Cahill.
Because Annie, can you remind Garrett, you've got special knowledge of.
So
of
I
properties.
worked for 4 years as the, I ran children's programming for the Edina Historical Society. So I was the head school marm for, yeah, for,
Expert tour guide.
Wow.
I know a lot about those properties. And yeah, I mean, I took literally thousands of first graders through there, plus summer camps and all that. So I've spent many, many, many hours in those. And someone asked me, I think it was when I interviewed to volunteer for this, where my favorite place in Edina is.
Yeah.
It's that Tipper Park. Yes, it's great. I mean, it's great. Robert might correct me if I'm wrong, but the Cahill School is the second oldest standing schoolhouse in the state. That's
I wouldn't wanna lay money down. It's a very old school building.
the only one that I mean, at least Fort Snelling is older. The schoolhouse is
Well,
inside of
there's actually
it.
a couple of public schools in places.
Really?
We have to.
I would love to know where.
In the original locations?
Well, then Cahill School gets dropped off.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
right, that's what we-
I'm not sure.
Mid-19th century one that's on this original.
Probably not.
Got it. We'll look into it before July.
Of course, if
Missed
you
it.
come down to where I live, there's 5 or 6 of them. that Probably were one-room schoolhouses until the 70s, and they're just sitting there in farm fields.
Where is that?
I live in Houston County.
Oh,
Oh, so,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
where nothing changes. But, yeah, there's lots of them that are unused. And there's a few that are used for other things. There's a couple of museums. Hay Lake School. Actually.
Okay.
But it's also had a kind of checkered preservation history. And I'm not actually sure how much fabric is actually there. But how old is it is important is what you can actually say about it. I tell you, it's by far and away the most successful one-room schoolhouse education program inside, because it's the most unique. Bob Coteen says, let's just make it part of the city parks department, and then he said and nodded and said, sure. And,
Yep.
so, it's like the house museums, there's 6,000 or 7,000 in the United States, and all but like 20 open at any given time. They're just on their last legs, literally. And I just gave the whole thing, he just threw it in the city budget. You can argue that the city doesn't invest as much as maybe they should sometimes, but in terms of maintaining the building, it's amazing how many COAs we've had to do for that structure. And they come with an interesting price tag.
Yeah.
But compared to other things the city does, it's spare change. It's
Yeah.
a new roof every now and then, rain.
Well, it can be a
Custom made,
significant revenue.
galvanized steel gutters.
We can look into that for when we visit in person. We can talk about the certificates of appropriateness that were issued.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, especially, the old parks maintenance guy, it was done by me, yeah. But whoever's in that job now would be interested to have a conversation. I mean, he would attend at least one meeting of the preservation board a year, just to update us on what the parks was doing and in Cahill and the Branch Hall, the Diamond Mill site. I guess those are the only 3 that they do maintenance. But
Emily, can I ask you, do we need to make this field trip we're talking about a separate item for the work plan, or can it just live under that? You can probably decide for the next draft. Do you need input from us on that?
I'd probably, with the draft that I'll bring to you guys next month,
Yeah.
I'd probably pull it out separately, so it's just another
Okay.
item that it's more of an event
Okay.
that
Great.
city council can be aware of.
And then question for Robert, I like your idea of prioritizing, if you don't mind, just ordering the 11
Yeah.
BOT in your recommended.
When I saw that in
That sounds smart.
minutes, I
Yeah,
did a list,
okay, great.
because we should do the older ones.
Yeah.
first.
And then I guess just to ask, especially Tommy and Bob who are on the call, I'm fine. The other language that came up last time was looking, especially with the garage language for country clubs plan of treatment. I'm fine just dropping that. I don't know, as we're prioritizing for next year. We talked about looking at that 10% garage requirement. And then I think Tommy had a suggestion of itemizing some of the ornamentation details a little more clearly. Do we want to keep that on work plan? Do we want, I don't think it would be hard to do that piece, but I'm just sort of teasing out so we can keep marching through.
Is that a separate work plan item or is that just like a sub item underneath the review of the
Agreed.
treatment?
Right. I'm fine with doing either way, dropping it or putting it late in the year and kicking it down till then. But I thought I would explicitly, Tommy, I don't know if you have thoughts on that, or Bob, you're in the district, you maybe brought up something on the garage. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm fine postponing that till later in the year. That's not a huge undertaking. It might just be a matter of, me putting my head together with fellow architects on the commission here. And maybe that's, just a small little subcommittee meeting. We could hammer that out in an hour or so.
Great. Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm fine moving even removing the 10%. I mean, I do think it's something when we get to reviewing the country club plan, that's one of the things that I've noted, but I don't know that it needs to be called out.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think coming up with a list of architectural details is a bad idea.
Right.
Like you guys said at the last meeting, for direction for other people. But it also came up at the last meeting. I think it's up to you guys whether or not how much leeway you want to give into interpretation. With the last certificate of appropriateness that we issued, it leaves a lot up to interpretation. And so whether or not it came up with kind of at the end of the meeting, whether or not you prefer in the future to continue those items. And so they're coming back in front of you guys to make that final decision, or if it's just a matter of more vague requirements for a certificate of appropriateness that then is interpreted by staff or whoever at the time of permitting. So that's also something to keep in mind.
Right, and it could be something that maybe we as a commission review as these could be architectural details
Yeah.
that aren't a window.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just something kind of that's more left gray in the COA, but something that we're all understanding
Yeah.
what that means.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I mean, there isn't any historic preservation reason for any of it. So, I mean, if you guys want to make it up each time, that's fine. I just live in the great fear that city's gonna get sued by one of these people, and I'm the one who's gonna be the expert witness, and there's no expert opinion.
Right.
This is,
Yeah.
that 10% was actually a member of the police department came up with that figure. So I mean, there isn't any, these are not historic buildings. They're new buildings that are replacing other non-historic buildings. What I can say is that it's really changed the aesthetics of the district in a positive way. But I'm not sure that the progress or the enhancement is the result of these fine tuning measurements on dimensional standards. I actually think what it's done is it's motivated the architects who design these replacement garages to kind of go above and beyond the ordinary requirement. Actually, I think you could probably make a pretty strong case that it's a positive. It's all, it's just not it's an aesthetic rather than a historic preservation. Doesn't preserve anything.
But does,
Yeah.
right, I guess, yeah, that's the big question of is like, preserving the streetscape, right?
Yeah.
It's not preserving it, but it's still kind
Well,
of
it's-
enhancing it.
it's not
It's not
making it
detracting
worse.
it, right, so.
You kind of look at that, half full, half empty.
Exactly.
But I think the more time you spend on trying to fine tune those dimensional standards, I think the less you get out of it.
Agreed.
So I wouldn't sweat it.
So maybe it is a case by case.
Yeah.
I think that would probably be, you'd be on the safest ground there. And it's part of my job is to keep you out.
Good.
I tell you, the other amazing thing, we've approved more than 150 of them in the country club district, and nobody's really pushed back. I mean, compliance is pretty high. Every now and then we get a builder that kind of doesn't do it based on the plans presented. They're not trying to undermine the historic integrity district. It just, their client wants something and they want to get the project done so they can get paid. That's also motivating. So I just don't think spending a lot of your time, since you're only budgeting about an hour a month to do these things. I think that's something you probably not do. But I think looking at plans of treatment, especially for these residential properties that were done really. For one thing, I acquaint you with the property. And we're gonna, the Dinah Theater sign's gonna land in your laps.
Yeah.
I kind of imagine.
Yeah.
Rather than later, and that is a very unique plan of treatment.
Yeah.
Actually,
So quite possibly, could that be a priority, just so we're all familiar
That's
with
a
that
smart
before
idea,
it?
well, yeah, depending on
Is it-
which way the needle is moving in the community development. I mean,
I like that idea. Let's put
because
that
that's-
up.
Because that's really not one of your top 11?
it lays out what it wants you to do. You, as the HPC,
Yeah,
actually hold the trigger for that.
So I'll list out all of the properties
Yeah.
in general, in the first designated to the last designated, and then you guys can move them.
Well, I think maybe, if you want to do the Dinah Theater first,
I would.
think that would be kind of, actually, you're gonna end up doing the Woodville Bridge first.
Yeah.
Take care of itself.
but I feel like that's pretty fresh, because we just designated, I guess maybe,
It's fresh, but nobody else has read it, so.
Right.
Let's just. But yes, so, if we did, even this year in calendar year 2021, if we took a look at the Dinah Theater, I think that would be worth it.
can we add that to our work plan
Well,
for this year?
it's gonna be an issue whether you
No.
want to.
We could say, review the 11 Heritage Landmark POTs for the 11 properties, beginning with the Edina Theater sign. I don't see why we shouldn't be explicit about that. Just
Right.
how we
Yeah.
have it, not
Not
right?
at all, yeah.
I think it's gonna happen.
But as far as,
2022, I think it's.
I don't think it'll come up that quick,
Well,
potentially,
when
but.
when you
Smart
read
to
the
have-
plan of treatment, it tells you what you're supposed to do.
And so, just so everyone's clear, they're all posted on the website
Yeah.
for everyone at any point, so
That's
Right.
they're accessible.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you might run out of time this year, so.
Should we hop to the next one?
Yeah, and I was actually gonna segue to that too, thinking about Century Homes. It would be good to understand kind of where kind of the bulk, those Century Homes are gonna be, because Country Club started
You're gonna catch up to
24.
the 100-year mark.
24.
This would be a great,
Which is
to do
yeah,
that.
so that's
Think
what-
about,
Right, is it like 5 and 24 and then,
Oh, no.
10, or is it
No.
I think
30
it
and then
was
50 and then?
30 and 24, and then it rockets up after that.
Yeah, so it would be interesting to understand that.
Where that is, and you shared a really neat map of
Yeah.
the build dates of, but this one, just for background, I mean, we looked at it a little bit last time, but that's my thought, is let's review the programs. As I said, there's this great program in St. Cloud, I'm sure
Mhm.
there's others. So if we just gather the info,
Curry's got a nice one with a
Okay,
little
great.
sign.
so we could find out who's doing
people
good
sound
stuff.
like,
I know.
I know.
I'm all for adding this to the work.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it'd be hard, but just get all the facts, everything that you think we're gonna need to present next year so that we could be ready to have it live by 24 at least would be the
I
thought.
think that would be
Okay.
an interesting public education exercise for you to engage in, because you tend not to invest much in that.
Right.
So is the idea in 22, it would be the research and all the stuff behind it? Or are you guys looking to do it all at once?
No, I would suggest researching.
Okay.
Here's what it would take. Here's the social media support.
Okay.
Here's what, what it should look like on the website.
Here's the budget we might need if we're gonna do plaques or things like that.
Yeah,
No.
just
And
get,
then 23 would be the implementation.
Right.
Of whatever plan. Okay.
Well, you can have a bunch right off the bat.
I was gonna say, because that'd be really cool if our goal was Preservation Month of 2024 to award.
yeah, and a non-country club, like a great old farmhouse.
Yeah.
that, you know.
We've got,
Yep.
I think there's 6 or 7.
Yeah, so you probably got.
This is the second time this has been suggested.
Oh.
I just
The dust up.
Dig in
Oh.
a file.
Okay.
I mean, it's not, and it's a handy kind of thing, but it also, if you start now, you're gonna get this, the beginning date for the country club district ordinance.
Yeah.
Which leads on to another strategic kind of thing. In 100 years, it's not the design lifespan for a house of the 1920s, it's all 200, so you're not gonna be there.
That's,
But still, there's, in terms of systems, you talk to building systems people, they'll tell you a sensor is really important. That's when all the mechanical stuff is obsolescent, if not dangerous, with windows, doors. And we already know that a lot of that stuff is already disappeared, but it's all gonna vanish in the next 25 years.
Another thing that I'll add that we've talked about previously that I did not include in the minute or this list is the 100-year event with the Historical Society that we've talked about. So I'll add that because we want to make sure that that's included.
Is that the sort of celebration for country club?
Yep,
Okay.
the Historical Society had asked if we want to do an event, whatever that might look like with them in the future. So I think the intent is that we might start planning whatever that event would be. So if we want to get people
What
to
else
sign up
happened
that.
in 1920?
Well, and is there I mean, I don't live in a country club, so I defer to my country club colleagues, but is there like a good neighborhood association, like robust, well, that we can?
there
work with,
is,
talk
but
to?
Bob would concur that it needs revitalization. So some of us are starting to try to do that with a hope to, you know, have new folks and block captains to do that. So that's a,
Well, the character of the district doesn't change very much with the inhabitants.
Mhm.
And they probably roll over about a third of every 5 years, I think, one time we figured it out. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, you gotta re-educate, re-contact everybody more often than we do.
you know, just as a quick aside, one member, we did block captains for the Just Deeds outreach that our group, the restrictive covenants, and one of those block captains said, hey, there's so many new folks on my block, let's do a welcome packet, and included would be history of country club, drawing from some of your stuff, and a copy of the plan of treatment. So we just reached out to the head of it, just by way of background for community outreach. But
I think that'd be a cool idea.
yeah, just so new folks know.
Mhm.
So I didn't try to touch anything on the archaeological, what do people
I think you
think?
should do that, because you have it all teed
Yeah.
up to.
For sure, but like, how do we, I didn't know what the language was and what the steps would be.
Well, I mean, Emily's note here, what role would the commission play in the project?
Well, I think we'll have to look at that because I think like we talked about, the grant writing would come from Robert.
I
And
mean,
then what role would you guys play in it? What do you see yourselves playing in it? I guess it might we might, depending on what kind of outreach we are looking for, with writing an RFP. So I don't know.
Remind me if you would, just to back up, like what, I
Where we
remember the
leave it.
presentation, it was amazing, but what were sort of the next steps? It had mapped likely spots of.
Yeah.
As
Okay.
a spot, like
Okay.
somewhere on that
Got
map
it.
that
Okay.
the
Do a
DEC created the map where
Yeah.
maybe there would be something.
Was it the Minnesota Department of Transportation's mid-model,
no.
No.
He did his own,
We
yeah,
got our own.
the predictive model, just based on
Yeah.
geography, distance from water?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, what the city owns and doesn't own.
Lots of other things, yeah, so. Messing with the
But
underground.
I think, Jeremy, if we used him as the consulting archaeologist, yeah. I mean, he really enjoys the public education part of it.
And he did some outreach.
Yeah.
And, yeah,
He enjoyed the hell out of it.
yeah, I mean, that's great.
And
And that
I
was,
don't know how many people showed up for that thing, but it was a lot.
I mean, I think it was a fair amount. And, that's great outreach for the Edina Historical Society too. So I think, I think that was a successful event.
You have 10,000 years of Native American heritage, you just don't have any properties that reflect that heritage unless you go out and dig some holes.
Right.
And until you start doing that, you're not gonna have any.
Did they identify in that previous work any previously recorded archaeological sites within Edina that?
No, in fact, he showed
That's
us a
right.
map.
And I've looked at it too on the OSA database and
Yeah.
there's really nothing in Edina that's.
He showed us a map of Edina and all the surrounding communities.
There's hundreds of sites that you get. Yeah.
We don't want to hear about them.
Yeah. It's like this giant donut hole, so we need
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
we need
Yeah,
to
you know
do
what,
the
you
next
never
step.
gonna find. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of these areas that are gonna be redeveloped, the potential for finding. Let's call it historic archaeological sites stuff from the 19th century. They're gonna become kind of common if we look for them. I always thought that we should get on the ball with that.
Mhm.
Because there's seem like large areas kind of slated in the top plan for redevelopment. That means,
So I'll look at it and I can talk to the community development director too, whether it's just a department work plan item, because Robert's work plan stuff doesn't come from the Heritage Preservation Commission work plan, it comes from our department work plan. So if it's just a matter of adding that and getting that approved or getting that, what he thinks about getting that into our
well,
work plan.
the earliest we could get the federal funding for it would be like October of 20. So actually, whatever would happen would be finished in the following
Mhm.
calendar.
Mhm. So maybe it's not a matter of necessarily, we could put something general like, work with the consultant on outreach or an event or something like that around.
Well, September is Minnesota Archaeology Month, and we get asked to see archaeologists.
But it might not be anything that you guys are specifically working on, it's more getting informed about what's happening or what. So it's not necessarily like, for example, like the mailings, it's not something that a small subgroup is working on.
Right.
It's just something that you guys are involved in, the education piece behind it and what's going on.
One thing that crossed my mind is, I mean, back to your comment about like what parts of that map does the city own? Like, is this a park and rec? Like crossover kind of joint commission situation at some point?
Cooperation, we talked to them, during the first phase of this, what, in 2018, I guess.
Yeah.
In 2019, I talked with the parks director.
And they were really excited about doing
Yeah, yeah.
a different interpretive kind of concept for the Diamond Mill, which also warrants another look archaeologically. The idea that you had 2 English majors from Hamlin University doing archaeological.
I'm an English major.
It was
Maybe I
nice.
should-
1976 was a really odd year in the profession, but yeah, all those things kind of and they produce measurable outcomes. You have events, people either attend or they don't attend. And
Well, I
you
remember discussion of like a community dig, like you could do like a little mini
Yeah.
public test site.
And that's great. And I have a long history with Brian Hoffman, who's still Brian. Yeah. So I was an undergraduate. And he was working on his PhD work at Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And then we crossed paths, worked together a couple of times since, but he has a really active and involved anthropology department behind him. And he does a lot of this sort of thing, reaching out, and he could maybe do some, I've done this with him before, something that's called a field school. So he would have some of his undergraduates who are at or near completion of their degrees, they come out and they basically volunteer their time to help excavate. Then you could bring in some high school students or some elementary school students to help out. And that's kind of a win-win.
Yeah, we did one of these.
In my mind, it's like. So can I get his information? It's not the community. Archaeology comments. Oh, that'd be so.
It's a man at Mankato States that.
Oh, Rod
Yeah.
But,
He's the new generation. All the other ones are my age. I guess we still able to do that stuff, but he's the only one that I know of that's really active, in that in public archaeology. He also has tenure, so he doesn't have to worry about all the stuff anymore.
is it-
So, go ahead. No, I was gonna say, just so from what's coming from us, is there like, a letter that we can write to, your department head, Emily, that's kind of in support of getting some funding to explore this? I guess what can we do to help move this along,
Because-
since we're not obviously in control of the budget or the RFP or anything?
It's easy enough.
That's a good question. I can try to figure that out and communicate it out. to you
Okay,
guys.
and then, maybe it's just you talking to.
But the trick would be to find the site to excavate first, since we don't have anything located. So it would be the phase one subsurface testing, maybe bringing some ground penetrating radar or something like that, and kind of do some.
Mhm.
It depends on where the areas are that we have access to, but the first step would be kind of identifying the spot.
Actually, we're dealing with children and amateurs digging a hole in a stair place is probably a really. It's a very possible thing that can happen when you have $5,000 to spend, which buys you about 2 days in the field with a crew. You don't really want to find anything complex because there's no time for lab analysis.
Yeah.
We all have licenses and that stuff. We just can't go digging holes in the ground.
Yeah.
So, but just doing poker chip archaeology, the public really gets into.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just, you don't need to find stuff.
So is that part, going back to the grant, is it the grant, the first step in that?
Yeah.
So then maybe we
What do you
work on that part of it before.
I was gonna suggest almost on two parts. One is that the staff pursues funding to do the site selection and initial dig, get funds lined up for that if we could. But then would it work as a work plan item that we collaborate with Parks and Rec and Historical Society to explore possible public events,
Yeah.
promoting
Which is how Jeremy did it
or
last
something
time.
like that?
And when he was retained by the city, he came to a meeting and said, this is what we do professionally. What do you want us to do to further your public education?
Right.
Outreach goals, and he really gets into that kind of stuff. And he also, he owns the company, so.
But we won't have an archaeologist in place until we get the grant money and then go through the RFP.
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna.
Process,
pursue
so
federal
that's
funds,
like-
we're
But we
But
have
next
to,
year.
but we,
January
yeah.
of 2022. And then I could write the application, but we wouldn't get a start date until the beginning of the federal fiscal year, so October 1st.
That would be next year's, but
That's true, but I
What
wonder with
con-
Garrett's contacts and the past report, is there?
Well, you can ask
to do
Jeremy
some-
to talk to you.
Exactly, is there something we can do to
Mhm.
build public?
He didn't go anywhere. He's still digging at Fort Snelling, so it's not like he's like the other side.
Well, maybe it's just a
Is
matter
that
of,
Royce and Royce and Bruce?
Yes, Royce?
That's Royce now, isn't it?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Is he?
Yeah, so he's just doing historic preservation there now.
Oh.
so maybe it's just starting with a conversation between staff people to see if that's even an option with their programming and whether, I don't know how that's all decided on, that's new to me, so see if they're open to that and we can kind of go from there.
And I don't know what the rules for this sort of thing is, but I have employees that work for me part-time that have master's degrees that should be willing to volunteer some time in archaeology that have experience doing this type of thing too. That would be willing to help out a little bit, but.
Especially if it's like during archaeology, y'all get
that's September, you said?
Yeah.
get stuff laid.
Yeah.
And I think that would, even if we couldn't finance an actual archaeological testing program right away, although the state would be all over us to do it. I mean, you can probably get one of the tribes to pitch, actually, if you ask them that stuff. I mean, they funded part of the program. It was cool. like going to casinos and asking them. But you could do something. And-
So we could potentially do like field school.
Well, no, problem if it's, but actually is a little different, you know, you have the Minnesota Archaeological Society showing up to get their professional cert.
Oh,
No, but if we were able to partner though with say Hamlin, or if Rob would be willing to do it, and they would have it actually as a course listing.
Yeah.
At the university.
oh, I see.
And then they're,
Oh.
so they need that, in order to be a professional archaeologist, you need to have that field school under your belt before you can actually be hired on archaeology crews. And so it's an opportunity for students that either.
But you could also find some faculty member who's got to teach a course in archaeology.
Yeah,
So that feels like something concrete that we could potentially do on this coming year's work plan.
Yeah.
While your grant writing and RFPs are happening in the background, but those are sort of
Yeah, you
in
could-
conjunction.
Something.
Maybe it's the outreach to those programs that you guys are working on.
There you go.
Okay,
Yeah,
There you go.
So, really nice topic, but just so I'm clear, when private properties are redeveloped in Edina, there's no requirement to do any archaeological work in connection with that. What about properties that are owned by the city or the Parks Department? Is there any requirement when there's sort of a municipal owned facility that's being redeveloped where you're moving earthwork
Yeah,
to do that?
it could be.
Yeah, depending on the project, I know like in certain redevelopment projects, you've been involved in those. Those weren't necessarily public sites.
it is kind of confusing though. So the Office of State Archaeologist has jurisdiction over, you need a permit if you're gonna be working on non-federal state land basically. But I don't know if there are ordinances in municipal level here that archaeological resources.
Oh, well, the ordinance apply, it mentions it. It just has never been done.
Yeah,
And nobody's had a project in a high enough sensitivity area where I was recommend that we do it. For example, whatever happens with the Wooddale Bridge is going to involve an archaeological investigation. If they didn't do one for an earlier project, and the Corps of Engineers holds the water permit.
yeah, so that's a federal project.
Yes,
Yeah, 106.
Okay, so that'll be required under. the
Section
federal
106.
regulations, But not because of a mandate via city ordinance.
Yeah, the
Correct, that's
city,
my state,
but
yeah.
the city is an equal partner in the 106 process that you're certified.
But it's not a city trigger necessarily. That's, yeah.
But the city trigger does exist for future. I like where Rachel's going with this.
Comment on any public project. Why, if you think there's a likelihood.
So in that last certificate of appropriateness, they're moving the foundation of that garage by perpendicular was before, so they theoretically be disturbing the subsurface like that. Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah, if you dig enough holes, you'll
Yeah.
find something sometime, but, well, actually for the house, I think it's,
Yeah, I was just gonna say that the house on Edgebrook, nothing was approved because they're just still in the process, but it was we suggested that they look into that, with the redevelopment.
on those kinds of projects.
But you can't require that.
Ask the developer, I said, well, you're gonna dig this big hole anyway, just look the other way, like find out. We have some
Action monitoring. Right?
We have absolutely no idea about the geology of the Creek Basin.
And the problem with that though is like requiring private properties to do that, like suggesting they're gonna do that. It's not in their best interest necessarily if they want to get their house built
yeah.
to
Right.
want to do that, right? The last thing you want to find is a historic site and all of a sudden now you've got other major
If you do
concerns.
one in Wayzata and you're on the lake time there, I mean,
But that's probably why is that a requirement, right?
yeah, well, they just insist on enforcing it because
Right.
the native people show up in the house meetings.
Well, I mean.
So what
I
is-
guess the
yeah.
point is There's not really like a sort of a city mandate in Edina to do
Well,
that.
what there hasn't been until Jeremy produced the map is an idea that, where would you want to look? And the areas that he designated as where you want to look are the places least likely to have any development activity. Which is one reason why we never.
Like a spot that's already designated as a park, for instance.
Like Brad.
Well, yeah, you can't build in the floodplain of Minnehaha Creek. That's
Mhm.
probably the highest hotbed.
Or a lot of those sites have been significantly disturbed in the past.
Yeah.
Where
I mean, so they're kind of, it'd be hard for me to say, yeah, we gotta do this now, it's gonna be lost forever. And what really confounds me is that nobody's finding anything accidentally. Although the longer I work here, the more strange stuff I hear about contractors digging up human remains,
Yeah.
putting them in a paper bag.
Scott, that's funny that you mentioned that, because I was gonna, is there at any point, like when you're excavating for a house and it is on private property and you come across dinosaur bones or human bones, like,
Don't get the.
is there, like, I mean, there is something that says you have to stop,
Yes.
right? But I guess where is that
Actually,
line?
it's a felony in Minnesota to disturb human remains.
Okay,
Yeah,
Minister Great Cemetery thing.
yeah, but it's,
There's plenty of urban legends.
oh, gosh.
I'm thinking of 3 right at the top, like.
Yeah.
I want to hear these after the meeting.
yeah. So Robert,
Ghost stories.
why is that as, kind of, what does their ordinance say that ours
Well, it does,
doesn't?
it's the same thing yours.
Or just the enforcement of it?
Yes, they need to do it because there's hundreds of burial mounds there.
Yeah.
It was one at the 101, they rerouted
Yeah.
101 through the lakes and they wound up disturbing a bunch of burials. So that Hamlin crew was out there for 3 summers. I think they had 20 or 30 archaeologists there trying to do salvage.
Yeah, there's nothing like that. I mean, the project that would have disturbed everything, which on Highway 100.
Yeah.
And in 1935. So I mean, we're a little late to the party.
But here's the deal, I mean, often, with this recent development that's taking place or might take place, where the Perkins is, right? And then the city's talking about, or the state, potentially relocating that entrance ramp in that whole area. I mean, shouldn't our ordinances and our, planning commission kind of think about whether it's appropriate to have those studies in connection with that?
Well,
And then also, even where there's like hey, we gotta build a new, bicycle bridge through Breslin, and it's the Parks Department that's handling it. Shouldn't that be, should we think about whether that should be a requirement when we're doing that kind of work?
well, like for the purpose, I mean, I commented on the EAW for it. And I considered potential for archaeology there, which would be hard to justify actually testing it for it.
But if
I
MinDOT.
think we're worried about some stuff going down.
I mean, MinDOT would require.
Yes.
Full, so-
And theoretically, they've looked, but that's actually pretty good at.
They are.
So I don't really worry about them, even for the LRT thing, they've already assessed that pretty well. So I don't worry about that. What I worry about is somebody digging a foundation in one of the lakes and hitting a prehistoric Aboriginal site.
Yeah.
Not knowing what to do. And now I just kind of hope, pray, that they call the city and then I find out about it, because we could put together a recovery team fast enough.
So would it potentially be that map that Jeremy provided?
Yeah,
Could that be kind of like our,
yeah, that's what.
a district, an archaeological district that people have to
Community.
come for a COA or at least get educated? Just to
Well,
happen.
another point too is, with the passage of this new, potentially local sales tax law, right? You might have in future more funding to do more municipal projects like Braemar, some of these parks and build more
Well, there's cities that have done archaeology all the time.
But I guess my point is the city isn't required to do it. Right?
Well,
And if there's no other factors involved, federal, state, what have you, should that be, I don't want to waylay this conversation too much, but maybe that should be a conversation. And part of this is for municipal projects, who gets to make the call and should that be something the city looks at?
Right.
Obviously beyond our scope, but maybe part of the conversation.
actually, your scope is all cultural heritage resources. So in order to say you don't want to do archaeology, I mean, the first thing you have to say is that, well, that means the heritage of people isn't important enough for you to be bothered with, which I don't think the city is gonna say.
Not a good look.
No.
Could we circle back to the work plan language then, if our focus is next year for public education, making city officials explicitly part of that education of here's what happened, here's where it overlays with city properties. Do we want to consider, here's language that other other neighboring towns have to sort of point them to. I understand you're saying it's unlikely, but would there be value there?
Well, the more you know, so yes, issues, the better decisions you make.
Sure.
So, yeah. But you have to start. And it's the.
Because potentially it could be like an overlay district. Could it be in as
Well-
far as, or no?
Well, you already have one archaeology site listed as a heritage landmark, so I mean, it'd be that same kind of thing, if you found something that you wanted to protect. I mean, Eden Prairie's got the little conservancy districts, and they give the developers credits for preserving them.
But I think we're probably a little far off from creating some sort of district or an overlay because we haven't even tested.
Yeah, you haven't found.
Right, but I'm thinking as far as like what we as a commission would kind of glean from
Well,
the.
you should all read the Jeremy's original report, because it lays out a fairly straightforward, right, this is what you do next.
Yeah.
Where do you get that?
Yeah, let's circle back. That's the work plan item, is to revisit the 2018 or 19.
Well, that leads
archaeological
me
report.
to something I wanted to say, just for your work plan, is to actually create an archive online of all the reports that we've generated.
Agreed.
That would be helpful.
Agreed. Yes,
And we should also take the original 1980 historic preservation study, which is still available for sale. But I think we should just make a PDF of it, post it online, and maybe
What was it?
Deborah Morse.
the National Register nomination form.
Well, no, it's the little paperback book. We used to give you all.
Yes.
Actually, we have.
I think what the title of it, but Jeffrey Hess, who founded Hess Royce, did that study in 1979, and it's really useful. We use it a lot. And then Deborah Morse Collins, Edina, kind of a coffee table book, is another one that probably would get readers if you posted it digitally.
If you have the rights to do that.
Hmm?
I said, if you have the rights to do that.
That city owns it.
Oh,
City's smart enough to
great.
copyright these things.
Excellent.
And,
Should we do that in conjunction with the Historical Society?
well, I think they might be interested in it too. I mean,
Yeah.
so, but we're doing it in.
Do they sell those?
for-
We do have those for.
For Newport.
Yeah.
Newport's putting all of it.
Undercut there.
all
Yes,
of it.
much.
Yeah, but how much are else possibly?
Yeah, you're right.
Right. And maybe it's released with Preservation Month in May, or just kind of.
Yeah.
Maybe some,
So are you thinking this database of all these reports would be like public on the website?
Yep, yep.
So any member of the public could see?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's
And then I would
I
have
like
to
that.
make a copy and send it off to everybody who requests
So sure.
suburban development in Edina after 1935 for I can't remember my own stuff now. But yeah, but I think that would be really handy, and we can do it. And it's, you know, it'd be sort of the next step. We created this library a few years ago. That's actually a physical preservation library. And I don't know why we weren't thinking about just making it a digital library, but we didn't. And we got a grant from Edina here, or the Edina Arts Council or somebody financed it. So there's one Senate of South Hennepin County, branch, whatever, South End. Of course, that building doesn't even exist anymore. I don't know.
all their stuff, I don't know.
And the other one's in your office, I think. And, but now we should just
We should.
take all of this stuff that we have. I mean, when you file the reports, it's impressive.
Is this a few hours of scanning or what is this?
Yeah.
entail?
I think the reports is different than the books that you're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, the books are, so the
Yeah.
reports are all.
Because some you're starting already, even with this outreach on the
Yeah.
eligible ones,
Yeah.
you're putting some of the context studies online. So,
Yeah.
so is that a work, I like that.
I like that.
Yeah.
Work plan idea, you know?
Or is that something that it's just,
Yeah.
We
well, it's
can't-
not- yeah.
Right. Well, we could look at the website. I mean, I think it's well, you've got a whole communications team. Is there any input that would be of value from this group and how that lives and is functional, or is that,
I know they're currently reworking the website, so soon it will look different.
okay?
I don't know. They do have some pretty strict parameters that they like to follow, so I work closely with them, like, this is what we're looking at wanting to do. How should I do it? So they kind of,
Ask if there's any role,
Yeah.
a work plan or
Yeah.
it's just.
right?
okay. Yeah, because I don't know if it's just
uploading PDFs. It's nothing that, it's just a matter of doing it. not
Right.
Talking about
maybe,
it or anything like that.
Well, and we have to go through there and make sure there isn't anything like personally identifiable to a individual, like if it speaks about, I don't know what's in these, all of these reports necessarily,
Little
what's
bit
their
of everything.
homeowner information, or, you know, I don't know.
There isn't current homeowner information, I don't
There's some.
think.
I don't think
Yeah,
any
look at
would necessarily be,
Yeah,
Like, I don't know if any
Part
would
of
be,
it,
yeah.
this would be,
Okay.
if there's anything, it would be an example of one of
Mhm.
these done from 8 years ago. Anyway, it's a nice idea to have.
But I mean, it's just collecting, what's that collecting dust, it's electronic, whatever electronic stuff collects. It's not being used. And I think that would be a
It's a great
worthy
idea.
goal, but especially taking these 2 published print books that aren't available in any other format. And that we must be getting kind of low.
so I think that's a separate item, Robert, that we're, okay.
I would say that because it's gonna involve, well, actually, we just,
That's working with the communications department.
yeah. But you know, you can contract it out at $150 to do a 300-page book. But I've written that I don't have a digital copy of, so I am now spending this so that I can give them away.
Then it's all the lost revenue,
Right.
you know, millions of dollars.
Academic press, because there is no, I believe so. It's like you can get lunch.
Yeah, I would have to talk to the communications department about that. I think they're kind of the keepers of that.
Yeah,
book.
but they know how to do it. And anything other stuff that we produced, you know, little odds and ends things that are in the files, all this country club advertising, for example, or some bunch of that. And it'd be nice to have it, so, because there's no reason to keep it in and I don't know, for 150 miles from the And,
So yeah, I think that's something good we can work on doing, look at doing,
Yeah.
not necessarily put it on a work plan item, but I can talk with the communications department and see what the best way to do that would be.
yeah, they would be the ones to ask, because
Yep.
they'd probably gonna
Yes.
have some insight to it.
Can I ask if we're ready to hop on? Can I ask for people's feedback? I just took a stab at retooling my thinking on the last one. An item we'd said is let's explore this demolition by neglect. Again, trying to learn from past experiences. This is of course referencing the 4630 Drexel house. But really, I think we know from our city council conversation, there isn't an appetite for, I mean, demolition by neglect, everyone said, sort of a third rail, you just want to try to avoid getting there. And based on, I mean, Robert made a past comment, part of what we need to do is educate even staff about what happens, right? And I think this is a case where well-intended people, some things didn't go well. So I would like to add a work plan item that looks at, and we can word it differently, but the interface between our group and the building policies, so that communication can be clearer between us, staff, and community input. I mean, I think, anyway, I don't need to revisit the particulars, I think, unless you need, Garrett, for.
I think I've picked up a little bit.
Yeah.
The last.
Yeah, but I just feel like, and I think we can, by doing this, hopefully help, and I had a call with David Fisher last week, how can we be helpful to you to help you avoid getting, you know, in a situation where there's sort of no backing out, right? So I feel strongly that this exposed some stuff that we need to tweak. So I'd love to see it on the work plan, but I would love to hear from the group if it's a priority and if that's the right approach.
Well, you would join a large crowd of HPCs looking at it. I'm just not so sure that anybody's ever really solved any part of the riddle.
Well, I guess you can't. However, if we knew that there was demolition done in violation,
Yeah.
right? What's the penalty there?
Yeah.
What's the reporting process? I think there's certainly some things that could be improved.
Yeah, you worry if this demolition by neglect winds up being successful for the people, you know, it's gonna wind up being a strategy that.
Yeah.
It's a big brand.
Actively pursued and.
Yeah.
And it's.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bottom line of the situation and the sticking point for us is there's no point of recourse. So like, that's where the identification needs to happen. Where does that lie?
Mhm,
And how do we get there?
mhm.
But I think the hardest part is what you said a minute ago, is what is the best approach?
Mhm.
Like, where is it, are we the genesis of that? This commission, is it planning? Like, where is that?
Well, it's, right now, this particular project, it's in the building department. Because there's open building permits, and so the building official is dealing directly with the contractor. It's really, though, the building official is working with the property maintenance codes, so it's kind of a cross between the health department and the building department right now, but the building department, the building official is dealing with it and working with it directly right now on this particular one. But property maintenance code falls under the health department. And then if there's open building permits, that's when the building department also gets involved.
But here's the thing, when does is it the city attorney that should be looking at this to see, is all of this functioning? Like, are the remedies here functioning, or do we need to, have a stronger ordinance to deal with this, to empower that building official, to make it happen? Because it's been with the building official for how many months, and like, and I'm sure that individual is frustrated as well about the way things are going. So I guess, the question is like, if this was on the work plan, like who should we talk to or visit with, or like what role do we have, and what role do these other groups have in sort of thinking about, whether we have strong enough tools?
Well, I know the building official, and I know other people have talked with him too. So he is really trying to work with people, because the other option is ending up in court, which takes time. Then you have to go out and get RFPs for work to be done on the property, which just extends the period where it sits. So he has been in communication with the contractor on this site. And he has been in communications with their engineering department that they're working with to make sure that work's getting done, to make sure that, there was a roofer on site on Friday that was, it doesn't necessarily look any prettier than it did, but at least it's protecting the building. It's because they closed up the roof or sealed up the roof where they needed to on Friday. But I don't know, that's a good question.
Well, and the thing is, like, part of this would be, should there be an ordinance in place so that if the building official needs to take action, you don't need to go do an RFP to go hire a roofer or, to save this property. That person is authorized up to a certain amount to go take that emergency action, right? To like, what are the things that we can do to make it easier?
That's what I can't speak to, because I know that there's certain rules and requirements through the property maintenance codes and through that, and I don't know if we can be more restrictive than those things or not. So that's above.
Part of it is maybe just helping us understand how this tangle of codes, because Mr. Fisher told me, well, if there's an open permit or application, property maintenance codes don't apply. So he's hamstrung, right? So there's some missing tools there.
Well, I think what you need to focus on is what your role in the process actually is. And I think a place to start would be this has happened before. And in fact, if you asked me to give you a little presentation on it, you would immediately pick up that it's the same cast of characters that appears in front of you with these things.
So
So,
they have to figure out.
huh?
So they have these same cascaders figured out. This
That's
is
right.
a strategy that's gotten them the ends that they're in.
Yeah, that'd be
Besides
the
drawing
kind of
this.
the negative one, but we went on a positive side. But that would be, it's a scarce kind of hazard. From your perspective, I mean, it's not something that goes on all the time, because you actually operate one of the more idiosyncratic preservation programs in the United States. So, and you have a historic district to administer that's unlike 99% of the other ones. So I mean, it's kind of a unique situation. Yeah, but you need to find out what your role could be if you wanted it to be, and what you're willing to do. Because what you don't want to get enmeshed in is the bureaucracy that makes all of this work. Because that's just, you're just never gonna get satisfaction out of that.
Yeah, but who's the party that convenes a conversation with all of these different stakeholders to say, Is our process working?
Well, the way he kind of historically has dealt with it, it's kind of like for, when it becomes a crisis, it's all hands on deck. And then if it's not a crisis yet, it's just whoever's unlucky enough to get stuck with it.
But that's what we're trying to.
Yeah.
Right? Can we get in front
But
of
it doesn't happen often enough to really rise to the, we've really got to do something.
Well, one thought that came to me is maybe having a conversation with our group. Are there conditions for a particular builder that if there's a whole house renovation that comes on us again, that we're comfortable putting on a COA? Right? Or banning a certain developer as a consequence? I mean, are those conversations, would that be in our role? Because I kind of agree, if it's a very limited set of actors and the system is largely working, can we just be explicit towards a particular builder? I don't know how that works.
I
Yeah.
doubt that,
I-
but I think that, we could maybe think about what conditions on a certificate of appropriateness you guys can place.
Okay.
And talk with our city attorney about that. And if there's like, you know, if there's, I don't know if there's a sequence of, if there's what permits can be issued or can't be issued until there's another permit for a model that's been pulled, maybe that's an option.
And Emily, is there anything that we can do that, you know, the COA follows kind of, like the house can change homeowners, right? And so is there anything we can do in that regard to say that that can't happen? Because this has changed owners now 3 times with that original COA.
That has come up in the past. I don't know if you guys remember that there was a house on Browndale, that changed hands.
Yeah.
And the project changed, but it didn't change enough to trigger a new certificate of appropriateness.
Right, yep.
Variances run through the land. The certificate of appropriate runs with the land. A certificate of appropriateness is not a variance, so that might be something I'd have to check with the city attorney on. So I don't know if that could trigger an automatic requirement or not. I don't know, Robert, if you're.
Well, the way I've been unlucky enough to have to be in a courtroom to explain this, and I haven't met a judge yet who really comprehended what we were trying to do, but yeah.
Because right now, if.
My interpretation is just what the ordinance, well, as I wrote it, but it says that the building permit can't be issued unless there's a certificate. So it's tied to the building.
Well, it wouldn't be tied to a building permit if the certificate of appropriateness
Is linked to another.
is the first step.
Well, it can be. I mean, that's, we're just sort of anticipating, because most of the properties that involve a lot of change in the country club district in particular, and they take longer than the 45 days we've allocated to take care of the COA part of it. So,
Or is the COA attached to a builder?
well, I think it's.
Because then there's an education piece that, you know, we
Well,
have a list of preferred.
Then we're gonna have to actually
But-
make that part of the process, and I'm not opposed.
I don't know if it could be tied to an applicant and then it
Yeah,
falls under
yeah.
whether the applicant is the contractor, the architect, or whether it's a homeowner, because we see both, we see all circumstances.
Right, right.
So
Yep.
I don't know if that's something that we can condition or
Now-
not.
The most complicated design review case the commission ever handled was when they changed out everybody's plumbing in the country club district in 2004, where we had 550 homeowners we had to deal with and the contractors. But the city required the contractors to kind of get schooled and how we wanted them to do the project. So there wasn't any, there's one COA for the whole project. And the homeowners were put in the hands of the contractors that the city had already vetted and educated. And they had their requirements from the engineers down to the plumbers. And that's how that worked.
I think that's just a matter, I think it's just a matter of having a conversation with the city attorney,
Yeah.
what we can condition. what
So
we
I like the way this is going, so let's revise it to say, let's work with the city staff and attorney to explore conditions we can legally add to COAs in the district in cases where demolition by neglect may be likely, or maybe we don't even need that.
No, I just honestly, I think it's
period.
period.
Good.
Is there
Because
a,
we never-
Because that would be the,
Yeah.
that would,
Then it's,
possibility
yeah, it's consistent.
for like a work session where we meet with the city attorney and building officials and we actually just talk about this issue and try to, that may be the most efficient way to do
Yeah.
it, is sit across the table and try to hash out what possibilities there may be and,
we could invite them to that meeting, right? We've done that before. Like if this is on our work plan, then we could say for February, let's invite the city attorney to our meeting.
I don't know that we've ever had the city attorney.
We've had the engineering department
The
for
engineers
years.
have always
For sure.
historically
Yeah,
showed up when we've asked them to. And although our relations with the actual personnel has changed radically over time, but I mean, they're used to seeing projects through to the end, and you're one of the folks that put to get into that part. But we've never talked about legal.
Yeah, I think
Nice
if
to
you
see.
would like that to happen, that would be a budget request because the city attorney costs money to attend the meeting. And so that would need to be included with our work plan item.
Yeah, I
That's
think
the-
that's why that never happened.
Well, I think we should request it.
well,
I
I
think
also,
we should request
is
it.
there a way to have it be a special work session so it's not public? I don't know if that would involve like advice to us or sort of being more candid than maybe that attorney would want to be if it was a public meeting.
I think the work session, no matter what, would be a public meeting.
Okay.
Because there's not, unless it's, they can have, city attorney can have private or meetings with city council on certain things that are private. But this wouldn't follow.
Yeah, you'd already had to be in trouble.
Yeah, it has to be, it would,
Yeah, well, that's what we're.
Let's not do that.
yeah, so it would likely just be at one of our meetings.
I mean, for sure, you would be meeting with the city attorney over that window in the garage. The
Well, we met with
45,000.
them plenty, our attorneys we met with.
Yeah, well,
It was
but
the city attorney.
I think it would then kind of. That would, I thought for sure that was gonna end up in front of the HPC, but it didn't.
I mean, it was suggested when we had our work session with city council, when this topic came up, one of the city council members did say, well, you have to make sure that you speak to the attorneys.
Yeah, you
So,
say that.
I mean, or
Yeah,
you
yeah.
did,
You're right.
so
Yeah,
we're
good.
following, I mean,
So I think if we include that in, working with city staff, working with the city attorney and inviting the city attorney and the building department or building official to a meeting to discuss or to work through or however we want, I'll figure
For
something
example,
out.
and is there benefit from getting language from what other cities do, to sort of give us comfort?
They're
Or
all over the map. It's like asking them what they think about Hardy Plain. You know, you
Have
got-
you heard any good ideas though in any of those other cities or any?
Not me. I was gonna suggest that you go to the next NATC forum, which is in Cincinnati in 2022.
that's another budget request.
But state will pay for you to go.
oh, really?
What is
Yeah.
that?
And it's in, well, I wrote it down.
It's
It's Cincinnati, it's cool. It's
It is a great
really
city.
interesting. They wouldn't be frightened by your story. You know, we had a national trust. down there. They rode on the bus through the country club. I had never seen preservationists from around the United States just so white in the face. You do what? What's a plan of treatment?
So one question that I
It's,
had for Robert, based on my conversations with David at the city. So thinking back to that conversation in April when we were talking with city council, and I think it was Councilman Staunton who was, sort of raised the question of the enforceability of the demolition by neglect concept. One of the things that David Fisher had brought up with me in my conversations with him, because I've spoken with him several times over the course of the last couple of months, was the idea that maybe we could require projects of a certain level on historic properties to take out like a bond or something like that, so that the city had
Yeah.
recourse if a project was neglected or abandoned midway through, so that there would be money there for, a roofer or whatever was needed. And so I'm particularly interested in that because I think it sidesteps the demolition by neglect. It just says so I would really be curious about whether we can put that as a condition or build that into our plan of treatment, that we say, if you are doing an addition or work that removes all or part of the roof and or siding, right? And I don't, whatever that language would be, and maybe our architects can help kind of clarify that in the right parlance, that there are different levels of insurance that need to be taken out so that there is recourse. And I think that sidesteps the legalities that Kevin was concerned about. And it would avoid what I think, and this has been my question to David, like we're 60, well, it's hard to believe, right? But we're 90 days away from potential of snowfly. And what's happening on this property is that every 3 days, two guys show up in a Cadillac sedan and go chisel away at the siding for a couple hours and then they disappear. They have no intention of trying to get this project done. Every other project in the district that wants to get done before the snow flies has 5 people working on it. So there's more to be heard about this property, unfortunately, but I think we can use it as a catalyst to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And I hope Robert's right about the scarcity of this, but I think this is another test balloon, particularly by this developer. If we don't make this really painful for them on the backside, this will happen again next summer.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's also with thinking with the bond requirements, we're gonna have to think about what projects what would trigger that, because right now, if someone's going to re-roof their house or redo the siding, it doesn't necessarily require a certificate of appropriateness. So it's not something that's reviewed by the Heritage Preservation Commission or by myself. So if they're going to, do that, we have to think through what projects we see, what projects we don't. Is there a threshold that makes sense? Because right now, I know the building department does that with new permits, new home permits.
Yeah.
They have a bond requirement that is that they're getting with each new home permit. But the permits that we get for certificates of appropriateness vary so much. So we'll have to think through how that might work.
I would suggest maybe it's something to do with new trusses, joists, whatever the language is, because that's what's happening here. David said, right? They had plans for a new home and now they realize we're not letting them do a new build. And so they're having to redo all the internal mechanisms and it's taking time. So that's one thought. It's a good question, but I like where this is going as ways to make sure it doesn't happen again.
And I think that ties back to the question, and we probably need some, to Jane's point about truly understanding the overlapping code requirements. So, and maybe Emily, you can answer this. So replacing a roof doesn't require a COA. Does it require something that suspends the property maintenance code, or does it not? And then the property maintenance code covers us when someone's just replacing their roof. Does that make sense?
I think I'm following. So yes, I think I'm
You had
following.
said earlier that or someone said earlier that when you have a building permit,
Yep.
then the maintenance code doesn't apply. Does replacing your roof require a building permit?
I would have to go double check because I know,
I think it does.
I think it does too.
Okay.
In some places
then-
I've worked, it hasn't, and some.
Well, it's what we're talking about.
It's a separate
Roof that we're talking about. Some people, it's just shingles and tar paper.
Right.
That usually doesn't require a building permit.
It depends on each, I think different communities handle them differently. Same with like replacing windows. or
That's like the
something
plant treatment refers to changing the shape of the roof. That's what triggers the.
Right.
Mhm.
the certificate of appropriate. So we don't have to start.
But yeah, Bob, that's something that, we can look into with this as well.
Right. I think what we need to do is we need to figure out when the maintenance code applies, when it does not, talk about what the various scales of projects or types of projects are, and therefore things that are protected versus not, and then try to close the gaps on the knots, is my view of it. But I like the idea of exploring whether we can add a bonding requirement more than the demolition by neglect rule, because it's an upfront cost of doing business and it doesn't require all the legal loopholes that David's trying to navigate right now and that Kevin was cautioning against.
Mhm.
And make for an interesting work session.
Does that give Emily you enough language to try to see something out for the work session, or?
Oh, I'll
You know,
work on something and like, it's nothing.
Yes.
If it comes on the next one, yeah,
Yeah,
it's gonna be finalized,
Yeah.
so we can
Yep.
do that.
You know, and I did one thought as I've been mulling this over too, just for all of us after that city council work question is, I want to be sure too that we are educating staff that rehabilitation is the preferred treatment, right? Because this builder's idea of replication seemed to get a little bit of a toehold with the mayor and some of the council members. So I think it's part of our job to really say, there's a huge distinction and we are spending our time to uphold what's written. If you want to, you know, have changed the rules and it's all about replication, great, but let us know.
Get back to the NAPC thing, they always devote a whole session just to demolition. And it involves hundreds of commissioners from dozens of cities across the United States. And I strongly, there's always been a Edina person on the board until a couple of years ago. Anyway, and so we've actually shopped concepts for Edina policy and had them discussed there. It's a very hands-on kind of thing. It's 3 days. You could just sit around people from Anchorage, Alaska, HPC. They were the parkas to San Antonio, July. It's chilling at night. But I strongly encourage you to kind of circle the dates and see who wants to go.
Do you have those?
Oh, yeah, the dates, say 14th through 17th. Oh, no, that's the Minnesota one. So it's the 13th, yeah, the 13th through the 17th of July, 2022. In Cincinnati, the Queen City. Which has a bizarre arrangement of historic districts. You'll be glad you don't live in Cincinnati, but it's very interesting, folks.
Okay, thank you.
They have little tiny ones that snake around.
Makes me want to go to Cincinnati.
Oh, yeah, they do a nice tour.
Okay, so, Jane, thank you for all that work and working.
Yeah,
thought.
and honestly, I can't do it when I'm live with.
Yeah,
people,
no,
but
and it's
hopefully-
very helpful,
Good.
always. Your guidance with that is excellent.
So I think the goal is I'll come with it filled out next time in hopes that we can get it wrapped up and approved or recommended so we can move forward with that. I'll double check the date on when it's due to the administration department to get it moving. With that, we might have the September meeting, but I'll have to double check, but I'll make sure you guys are aware of that with when I post it. Right, next month.
And
I
then
think you should have as many public education things, because the comp plan really tells you to make this goal, and you gotta start doing it, because over time, it's amazing to me in 40 years how little.
Well, I think a lot of the items that you guys talked about does include a lot of outreach.
Yeah, so, and that's a good sign.
And then I'll lay everything out, and then another thing you guys are gonna wanna think about is prioritizing. And, are you gonna want everything on the work plan for next year? Can you accomplish everything in the work plan next year, or is there some items that we'll wanna put in the parking lot? And so think about the prioritization of it all too.
And what each of us might be willing.
Yeah, what you're interested in, because we'll
Determine.
take, yep, we'll take people's names down and kind of create those subgroups like we did last year.
Well, just remember, you have something to do in all 6 program areas all the time. And, so stuff happens. And you're gonna have to reprioritize several times. It's really probably not terribly working that there's an actual, we're gonna do this first. We're gonna do this last. Let's. In the past, you chosen, to do things out of sequence. Kind of take it up as you go along.
But we'll need it prioritized for how we want it.
Yeah.
Things change, but think about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any more on the work plan? I think we did a very good job. taking the brainstorming to the next level. And yes, we need to make sure that when we see it all in its form, if it's manageable,
Mhm.
we have to make sure it's manageable.
Well, I like that you're doing this in one sitting or two, like we'll be starting last. Some years this gets to be the end of the meeting thing after you've refereed some other kind of event. The more time you invest in this, the better off you're gonna be, so.
Okay, so the next section is chair member comments. I don't have any comments. Does anybody else? Commissioners?
Is there any update on the Drexel property? I know that people, that's kind of the question that everybody likes to ask. So is there anything official?
David's working with them. He's in contact with them often. Friday, there was roofers out on site. Like I said, getting things weatherproofed is what it's, to my knowledge, sealed up. They are working with their engineer, their structural engineer, to get their plans redone. And that should be, I think that's done. So I think we're expecting a permit this week for
Okay.
now.
Okay,
So that's my latest knowledge on it.
but it won't come back to us. They're sticking to their, but they,
I haven't seen it, but I think I've heard that's the intent. Yes.
okay, great. Thank you.
Anyone else?
You have your state conference coming up. It's going to be a webinar again this year. So you don't have to schlep over to Stillwater. That was the original site.
What are the dates?
The same dates as the other conference, but in a different year, 13th.
Oh, July?
14th.
September.
Oh,
And you've gone to that.
Yeah, so
Last year, over
Hold
years,
on,
I guess.
to register one person. So at least one of you has to do. I didn't think there was even a charge for it
last year, I don't think there was. I haven't seen anything emailed out about
No.
this year yet, so I'll make sure to share that when I see it.
Tackle Michael Coop inside of his office. He said, you know, you're gonna make us do this. You gotta tell us like when it's gonna be. So they're gonna not do it in person next year. Unless something else catastrophic. And I have no idea. I don't think they actually have climbed up the participants yet. But he gave me the dates.
Okay. So we'll need to identify who's doing that this year.
Yes.
Yeah, because every year on our annual report, we have to note that in there.
So should we all look at our calendars and then maybe be prepared to
Next year.
August,
like
add that to an
webinar
agenda items?
Online for a week or something, it's always. You have to tune in at 7.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, nice. Actually, it was also made it very easy to just kind of say you were there. My maintenance.
Robert, that's not.
I know.
He didn't do that.
Strike that.
Yeah.
Actually, the best attendance they ever had was when they had the Shell Brewery.
Oh.
The
I
entire,
bet.
the entire reservation board. And staff, that one. So, I ended up doing Wisconsin the same week. Wisconsin is.
Emily, do you have any comments?
Just an update, the Bruce Garage that we saw at the last meeting, they did request a variance to the planning commission. At the last minute, they added solar panels to the garage to, use or to justify some of the height reasoning that they had. Ultimately, it was denied by the planning commission and, they're moving forward with the garage with a height that complies with the zoning ordinance. So,
Great.
Okay.
Are they moving forward with the solar panels?
the solar panels were a phase 2. item,
Oh,
So not at first.
I'm surprised we're not seeing more of those. I mean,
Yeah.
nobody in the preservation business really knows what to do about it.
It's a very good.
There's no consistency at all, and it's. And they're fighting over, you know, the effects. There's some kind of solar absorbent paint that is now the new thing to use.
Yeah, they didn't need a variance for solar panels. It was for the height. And the zoning ordinance allows the height. So the structure height requirement is 18 feet. With the solar panel, you can go 2 feet above that. So they can be 20 feet with the solar panel. So they were asking for the 20 feet with the additional 2 feet for the solar panels.
Oh. Okay,
Thank you.
if there's no further staff comments, the last thing is a motion to adjourn. Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Emily, can we get a roll call vote on the motion to adjourn, please?
Yes, Commissioner Longquist,
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock, Commissioner Cundy,
Aye.
Commissioner Knudsen,
Aye.
Commissioner Woodmeyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Nemo,
Aye.
Commissioner Everson,
Bye.
Chair Schilling.
Aye. All right, thanks, everyone. It was.
Thank
really
you.
fun to for you.
Wow.
Should have brought pizza or cake.
I know, drinks.
Great way to-